Exorcist II. For those times you just really want to see James Earl Jones dressed up in a locust costume. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. As part of my Exorcist review series, today I'm going to be talking about the second film in the Exorcist franchise, 1977's supernatural horror sequel, Exorcist II: The Heretic. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Exorcist II: The Heretic stars Linda Blair, Richard Burton, and Louise Fletcher, and was directed by John Boorman. 4 years after the events of The Exorcist, it tells the story of teenage Regan, whose suppressed memories, and something else, are reawakened during hypnosis therapy. Sequels, especially horror sequels, are inherently rough territory. Although it does happen on occasion, it's rare for a sequel to surpass the original film. And so when the original film is something as groundbreaking and iconic as The Exorcist, the follow-up sequel is put in an especially tough spot. How does one even approach a task like that? Do you rehash the story and amp up the terror to try to outscare the crowned scariest movie of all time? Do you take the characters and ideas of the first movie and try to craft an interesting follow-up story? Even though audiences surely wanted more of The Exorcist, whichever direction the filmmakers went with this sequel, it was bound to disappoint. Unfortunately, that's just an expected outcome for this type of situation. It's the degree of disappointment that can vary. Following up a film like The Exorcist, I think a reasonable best-case scenario would have seen audiences walking out of the theater saying, it wasn't as good as the first one, but it was okay. But Exorcist II did not see that kind of best-case scenario. Instead, it was met with laughter at its premiere, and people walking out in the middle of screenings across the country. I don't think anybody expected Exorcist II to be great, but I also doubt people expected it to be one of the most pronounced first to second movie downgrades in film franchise history. As you could probably already guess, I'm not a fan of this film. But I am a fan of film. I like to like movies. So I really hate it when I find myself in the position of actively disliking a film. But even in cases like this, I always look for the good in a movie. Every movie has its fans. I know there are some big fans of this one out there. The way I see it, every movie that's ever been made is somebody's favorite movie. Just like it's also somebody else's least favorite movie. So even though I have a lot of problems with this movie, that I'll get into, I will credit Exorcist II with trying to do something different. It would have been easy to just rehash the first film, to put Regan or some other kid in the same possession position and watch as another exorcism was performed. There are some familiar elements at times here, but this takes an incredibly different route. Rather than the simple, tangible, and comparatively grounded story of the first film, Exorcist II becomes a story of the mind, of psychic connections and hypnosis and visions. It takes an almost experimental approach to portray this metaphysical angle. And to be fair, I can sort of see what they were trying to do. This mental aspect of the story had some potential, it just wasn't well executed. The psychological approach of the first movie doesn't translate well to the psychic approach here in the second. What starts off as a seemingly interesting examination of PTSD and memory suppression quickly turns into a jumbled mess of story ideas. There's almost a plot through line that you can grab onto and follow, but it's not always there, so it's easy to get lost in this film. It's not always clear where the characters are, if they're awake or dreaming or having some sort of vision, if they're themselves or under Pazuzu's control. This was a film that had a lot of production issues, including the writing of the script, which probably had the biggest impact on the film. This is not a movie that's particularly coherent. At times, the plot is pretty incomprehensible. All the things that were so good in the first movie, the acting, the makeup and special effects, the cinematography, this is like some bizarro mirror version of them. You'd think a movie with Max von Sydow, Richard Burton, Louise Fletcher, and returning Oscar nominee Linda Blair would be at least decent from an acting standpoint, but yikes. I suspect it was largely the script and the directing, but some of these people really did not look like they wanted to be there. Then you throw in the lack of interesting makeup and some ridiculous special effects, and you have a movie that would pale in comparison to the original, even if it had had a halfway decent story. I know that The Exorcist is frequently cited as the scariest movie of all time. I've never personally found it to be all that scary, but I do think it has a really unsettling, uncomfortable atmosphere, which works for the story and the genre. The film's scary reputation has no doubt grown over the decades, but it had a reputation back in the day too, with people leaving the theater sick and even audience members heading straight into churches after getting out of their screenings. So I can only imagine that even then, people were expecting and hoping for another dark, moody horror film. But that's not at all what they got from the sequel. Many of its attempts at being scary are unintentionally funny, and it ditches that dark, unsettling atmosphere for an atmosphere that can only be described as weird. It pulls in elements of giallo and other European horror and thriller styles, but doesn't know what to do with them in the context of an Exorcist film. So it ends up being nonsensical, but not even in a fun, weird movie kind of way. As a follow-up to The Exorcist, Exorcist II is utterly dismal, but even when you pull it out from the first film's shadow, this isn't a movie you'll likely want to have in the light for very long. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. The solitary pro of this movie for me is the score. Now, this isn't a top-tier score for me, and probably isn't even something I'd really bring up in the pros section under normal circumstances, but like I said, I always look for the good in a movie, and yeah, this is the extent of that good. Interestingly, the iconic Tubular Bells theme from the original film is nowhere to be heard here. Instead, Ennio Morricone, of then giallo and spaghetti western fame, provided the much more present score. Of particular note are two songs. The first is Magic and Ecstasy, which was used in the end credits as well as the film's marketing materials. The song couldn't be any more different from Tubular Bells, and certainly has never screamed Exorcist to me, but the weird acid rock psychedelic style of it is still very catchy. The film also features a more gentle song called Reagan's Theme, which is pretty nice, and almost certainly had to have influenced Philip Glass when he was composing the Candyman score 15 years later, because that same melody pops up a little more complexly as Helen's theme in that movie. On the con side is just about everything else. But let's consolidate things and talk about the big issues. Con number one is the script. So this is something that kind of has a negative ripple effect throughout a bunch of different aspects of this film. Some of the dialogue is pretty laughable, but the main problem here is the story. What they were going for was a weird redirect from the first film to begin with, but it's made all the worse by being largely incomprehensible. It's this weird fever dream of ideas and plot lines, and nothing ever truly aligns in a coherent way, so it ends up being a strange and difficult to follow mess that manages to somehow be boring at the same time. The second con has gotta be the performances. After a set of 4 strong performances in the first film, it's wild to think that the acting would drop off so dramatically in the sequel, especially with both Linda Blair and Max von Sydow reprising their roles. To be fair, von Sydow's barely in this, and he's okay, and Blair does her best with the material provided. The script no doubt negatively affected everyone here, but Louise Fletcher and Richard Burton turn in especially iffy performances. Richard Burton has always had a theatrical, over-the-top side to his acting, but he takes on an especially melodramatic quality here. He probably says the word evil 50 times in this movie, but he says it with such a ridiculous overacting emphasis that I swear, every time, it would make me think of Mermaid Man from SpongeBob. So, yeah, clearly one of the great performances in horror. Con number 3 isn't as big of a deal as the other 2 cons, but it's the special effects. Again, this is a huge 180 from the first film. The effects in that movie were comparatively quite subdued, but they were well done. Things are a bit more bombastic here, especially during the finale, but whew, they're not very good. There is a decently creepy superimposition effect used during the first hypnosis sequence, but other than that, this is rough. Among the worst of the effects here is the locust. The locust swarms are absurd, but occasionally creepy. But the way too frequently featured shots of Pazuzu as a single locust are laughable. He's either flying right at the camera or right away from the camera, and it ends up looking like some sort of outtake from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. This is made even more ridiculous when we get to see those scenes from Pazuzu's point of view, and watch dozens of extras tripping over themselves pretending to be afraid of a chaotically twisting and turning camera. Before I give you my rating recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Exorcist II, The Heretic, or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy to one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Exorcist II, The Heretic, 1.5 out of 5 paws. This is a bafflingly huge step down from its predecessor, tossing aside the atmosphere, strong performances, and impressive technical elements in favor of a confusingly jumbled, almost incomprehensible plot, plus a strange fixation on locusts. I would recommend Exorcist II, The Heretic, to people who want a strange 70s fever dream of a movie. If experimental oddity is enough to entice you, then you might get something out of this, but fans of the original Exorcist will be massively disappointed by the shift here. And even people who didn't like the first movie probably won't find this dramatic change in direction to be all that appealing. Not even falling into the so bad it's good category, this one's for franchise completionists only. If you liked Exorcist II, The Heretic, I would recommend Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. This is obviously another horror sequel, and although it's certainly a bit better than Exorcist II, it's still a far cry from the first film in its respective franchise. The draw here, though, might lie in its similar reliance upon a telepathic mental link between characters. If you really liked the locust centricity of this film, you should check out the 2020 version of The Swarm. Not to be confused with the 1978 Killer Bee movie, this French film offers up a dark and at times creepy story about locusts with a taste for human blood. And if you're interested in another hypnosis horror sequel, you might want to watch Insidious: The Last Key. This movie features some more of the expected franchise demon creepiness, and also has a dreamlike component that's somewhat similar to what characters in Exorcist II experience. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Exorcist II, The Heretic? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's the most disappointing follow-up sequel? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below, so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainely Movies, the way life should be.